So, a common question that we get asked is, should I add water or ice to my whiskey? And the simple answer is that there really is no right or wrong answer to that. Despite what you might have read or seen, in magazines, books, or YouTube videos, you quite often see people saying, oh, you should never add water, or you should never add ice, or do this or do that. But there really is no right or wrong answer. So let's start with water. And water can change a whiskey positively and also negatively if too much is added. So what a lot of people don't realise is that a lot of whiskies they actually have quite a lot of water added in the first place. So this is a process called cutting, and this happens before the bottling. So the whiskey in the cask will be a much higher strength than is not so approachable for a lot of customers. So what happens is the whiskey companies, they will cut it down to a more approachable strength for bottling. So this is normally between 40 and 46%. So they add the water anyway. So anyone that says don't add water to your whiskey, just think of that anyway. There's a lot of water added anyway. It could have come from the cask, anything between sort of 50 to 60, maybe even over 60%. So that's called cutting. And another important thing to remember is, and this really helps with there is no right or wrong answer, is that most of the people that either make the spirit or put or blend together the products that we go out and buy in a bottle, they all add water. You talk to any of the distillers or master blenders, and they are adding water, and in some cases, very significant amounts of water, to try and analyze and see sort of what's happening with the whiskey. And they'll try at different sort of amounts of water to actually see how the whiskey or the spirit off the still is performing. So again, if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for us, to be honest. But what does adding water actually do? On a basic level, of course, what's happening is you're diluting the whiskey. So the strength, the ABV, alcohol by volume strength, will come down, and it makes it a little bit more accessible and approachable to a lot of people. But also what it's doing is allowing aromas and flavour compounds to come out and present themselves when they can be sometimes, particularly in higher ABV, higher strength whiskies, they can be masked a little bit by this high level of alcohol. So by knocking that back and diluting it a bit, it can actually present these different aromas and flavours. So this is again why the master blenders in particular, they do this, and it's a little bit like you can really add as little or as much as you want. For example, you can just put a tiny little dribble in, just like I've done there, or some people they use like a little pipette or a dropper to control it even, to add like 1 or 2 or 3 drops of water. But what it does, you'll see it immediately releases a different set of aromas, and then when you taste, a different set of flavours. And of course you can keep adding as little or as much as you want, because of course go slowly, go in stages, because if you add too much you can never take it out again. But of course if you add little bit by little bit, you can start to work out what level of water you might want with certain types of whiskey. It's a little bit like if you have a glass of cordial or squash. Some people like very concentrated, some people like it very watery. I kind of like it somewhere in between, and I'm a bit like that with my whiskey as well. I put a little bit of water in, but not too much to drown it, so that you can't really smell or taste anything else. So what type of water should you use? That seems like a strange question, because water is water, right? But of course there's different types of water. So you can have, from the tap, as I've just done here. But what you have to consider there is, it depends on where you live, whichever country or whichever region of a country you live, because you can have hard or soft water, and of course it's treated with chemicals, particularly chlorine and fluorine, which can affect the taste of the water, and therefore you're going to put that taste into your whiskey. So that's worth bearing in mind. Of course, you can have something like a mineral water as well, but this can have a similar effect actually. I mean, a lot of people swear by mineral water, but if you think about where mineral water has come from, it's permeated and bubbled up through rocks over, sort of hundreds of years. It's picking up like salts and minerals and so on, all the way through its journey. So again, sometimes these can have, slightly sort of affected sort of flavour in the water, and of course then you're passing it on to your whiskey. You can also get, sort of very neutral waters. You can get distilled water or something like this, which is, being released in a can. So it's very neutral water that's designed to put into your whiskey, but not to affect the flavour. It's literally to dilute it and allow those aromas and flavours to come through. So you could think of something like that, but it's important to have it as still water. Never carbonated. I wouldn't recommend that, because that of course can affect the flavour and the structure of the whiskey as well with the carbonation. It's very nice if you want a very refreshing, like a highball style cocktail or something like that, with a bit of whiskey, fill it up with some carbonated water with a load of ice on a hot day. Very nice, but really not for sort of analysing or tasting whiskey, sort of quite normally. So what about ice? Ice is a little bit different, because what it does, when you put ice into a whiskey, like I've done here, of course it dilutes it as the water does. It takes a bit of time, but of course the ice starts melting. But what it's doing is it's dropping the temperature of the whiskey very rapidly. So it's locking in aromas and flavours. So while it creates a very nice, very pleasant, refreshing drink, it's no good really for analysing, because you're locking those aromas and flavours in. So if you want to sit and enjoy, a whiskey and get its full character, then of course, adding ice is not really the way to go, but it is a very refreshing way. It's a little bit like if you have a white wine that's a little bit too chilled, and it only really starts to reveal its full flavour profile when it actually comes a little bit more up towards room temperature. So that's it in a nutshell. Adding water, adding ice, whether you should or shouldn't is up to you. Whether you want to or you don't want to is up to you. But there's some key things to remember. Firstly, have fun with this. Don't take it too seriously. Some people get very excited about this and whether it should or shouldn't happen. There's no right or wrong answer. Your own preference is the right answer. So experiment. Try different whiskies, different types of whiskies with different amounts of water, and you will find your own way to enjoy. So a certain whiskey might want a little bit more water, and another type of whiskey might want a little bit less. So just experiment and have fun.